Let me see if I can get online.
I see it.
Yeah.
Is it HTH? Public?
Yes, it should be.
That's, I see it.
Each public.
Oh,
Okay. And being 7 o'clock and having a quorum, let's see, let's get started.
On the other side of your computer.
Um, yeah, so it should be in.
I'm on.
All right. Again, you try and find that presentation while
it's a matter of if I find it, what do I do then?
I'm,
How do I connect to there?
Share.
You gotta join the meeting, don't you?
yeah, during the meeting and,
That should do it?
yeah.
You want me to go to the meeting that I can?
Oh, yeah.
Am I the only one with the presentation or is?
Ken has it too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I did from the email attachment. That's the only place I have it from.
Yeah,
I don't know how to download the presentation from the,
Well, you have to open up your.
just open up the presentation.
And then you open.
Yeah, just the
Go
PowerPoint.
to your.
That part I could do. It's getting hooked up, that's the issue.
Is
Anyway,
Scott coming tonight? Do you know?
Scott is not coming.
Okay.
He may try to dial in.
what
He
is the
said,
presentation on my screen? So now,
You gotta join the meeting.
join the meeting and then, yeah, then you
can
can,
I join?
and then once you're in the meeting, then you can share. No, the logistics, it's just, you know.
Gary's joining.
Aha, that should do it.
Yeah, we're good.
Are we?
Yep.
You got it?
Yeah, okay. So introduction. Just run through the first little bit. Any public comments? You're the only public person here, so I'm here just doing presentation, so. The March 12 meeting minutes, did anyone have any comments on those? Nope, okay. I had some minor typos, for example, in discussing Robert Whitenick or Mr. Whitenick, name spelling was wrong, so I changed that. And then it said it used to be with Beals and Thomas, I changed that to retired from. Clarified a little bit with regard to their discussion of public versus private trails, that private trails shouldn't, should not be named because they're not part of our public network. So I look for a motion to accept the meeting. Second, those minor edits. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. We have no one online who's a
I
member.
had a stain because I wasn't.
You can still vote.
Well,
It just
Yeah.
means the voting is that you recognize that there are minutes.
I recognize your. Okay, so I'm on.
Okay, second and third items are project updates and then updates in the action of other boards. The fourth item is the connectivity discussion. Gary Trendle, who was formerly king of planning board, but also was instrumental in putting together the connectivity study that the planning board did to kind of get, it was a survey to get people's opinions on what they wanted to see, what was important. So Gary spearheaded that effort, and I thought it was important for us to not lose that information, and sort of bring him in and kind of to talk through that for us, and I'll leave it at that. You can
All right.
kind of go through your purpose, et cetera.
Sure. Thanks for inviting me,
Thank you.
Peter, and nice to see some familiar faces. And for what it's worth, I served on the planning board for 6 years, chair as I think 4 of those, but I was also, a long time ago, I was a member of the Upper Charles Trails Committee as well. So, always had an interest in trails and in general, just, enabling people to walk and run and bicycle more in town. So, there. All right. So we'll be a little small on some of this text, but I'll do my best to walk through it. So and as Peter said, just a little bit of background. We had initially fielded this study. This stemmed out of some of the failed attempts at sidewalks, actually, at town meetings, call it 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And, sidewalk initiatives that were proposed by DPW that never seemed to get much traction at town meeting, and, for budget reasons or other purposes. And we said, well, rather than just sort of having the DPW pick what they thought would be good streets to build sidewalks on, let's try to understand people's desires and behaviors and really kind of, what they're looking for. And so the idea was, rather than sort of survey the town and say, which streets should we put sidewalks on, at which point whoever lives closest usually are the ones that want those. We said, let's understand those behaviors and drivers, and then we can go, put forward some proposals based on those results. And then, so this was, I think we fielded the survey in, I want to say, Q4, the end of the year of 2021. So it's a little bit dated now, but I'd argue it still holds largely true. And again, because it wasn't street specific, I think there's some usefulness in it. So our objectives, again, really understand the underlying preferences and needs, what we call non-vehicular connectivity for Hopkinton citizens. So walking, running, and then myself as a cyclist. We did a little bit of cycling assessment as well. And the idea was that we would use this as the basis for a Hopkinton pedestrian connectivity plan. And so part of the vision that we had was, how can we build more linked trails, sidewalks, whatever it is, to enable people to move around town, without cars. And then as a result of this, we did actually propose some investments. The primary one is the sidewalk that will be going in on Chestnut Street. I think this year, it was passed almost 2 years ago at that town meeting, but you'll see how that fits in here. But that was really we realized that was a really good connector that connected neighborhoods and provided some good safety improvements in trail loops. It was a web-based survey. We had 368 total respondents. From a survey perspective, it's what we call a branched survey. And what that means is that that not everybody got the same questions. So if you identified interest in a certain area, then you got questions. If you didn't have an interest in that area, then you wouldn't get those questions. So the actual sample size is a little bit different depending on the question.
How did you find these people? Who went to this to fill it out?
Yeah, great question. We posted it on the town website. We posted it on Hop News, Hopkinton Independent, eHop. And then we also distributed it, the Trails Committee, for example, the Running Club,
Senior citizens.
senior citizens. Basically, we tried to get it to anybody that we thought would have an interest in this. So it's not, to your point, it's not necessarily representative of the broader community,
Mhm.
but we wanted to hear from people that we thought.
Right, it's better than not having it at all.
And I should say too, 368
Yeah.
respondents is pretty good. I mean,
Right.
it's, I'm not a statistician. I can't tell you if these responses are statistically significant, but in past surveys that they've done, they'd say maybe 150 to 200 responses. So
Yeah, that was
368
several.
was pretty good.
Yeah, you're gonna be biased towards people who have an interest in trails connectivity,
Right.
which kind of is what you want to be doing in this case. So yes, there's a bias, but it's not a bad thing.
Right.
So collectively, and let me go through the next couple of slides pretty quickly. But from an executive summary perspective, and I think this is all things that we already know, but Hopkinton is an active community. We saw a lot of interest in using trails for multiple purposes. More than 85% of respondents believe that more trails and sidewalks would improve mental and physical health. Respondents wanted to invest in both sidewalks and trails of various surfaces. And at this point, we had a lot of debate around pavement versus gravel versus single track. And what we found is there's a desire for all of them. We did see the respondents that we did see a slight preference for paved surfaces, but again, desire for all types. Fitness runners, walkers, cyclists, to characterize those people that are not using these pathways or sidewalks to go, to work or to go shopping. They're generally wanted to be located away from the street in some way. They want to get away from cars. And what we found is that they like loops of 2 to 4 miles. So that was a really interesting observation, because when you have loops, then that lets people start to connect them. And I think to me, what was most interesting, I go back to some of these sidewalk articles. I said, well, geez, why are we going to pay for this when the only people that benefit are the 12 houses in front of that sidewalk? But in reality, if you're connecting neighborhoods or if you're creating loops, then anybody in that, say, 4-mile loop now benefits from having that trail or sidewalk that's a part of it. And so that 2 to 4 mile range was enough that for people that walk a few days a week, people that run, they can link them together. And it's just a kind of a useful metric. And then we also asked respondents, how far they were willing to walk if they're going to a business or to school. And in general, we found them willing to walk a mile. And so this just sort of is one of our hypotheses was that, there's a need for greater investment, in particular in downtown and around schools, because those are places where people are more likely to walk to and from. And I think we were surprised to see a willingness to walk that far. And maybe not for us as active people, but, within the community, some willingness to go distances. And all of these are set up so that you can see the question at the bottom. So in this case, would you like to use sidewalks or trails for each of these following uses? And again, 351 for fitness, walking, or running. So again, to the points earlier, there's some bias here. Survey active people, that's what they use them for. Traveling to neighbors, traveling to businesses, cycling, and then traveling to school. Although it's worth noting that not all of our respondents have school-age children, so not surprising that number is a little bit less. I think I can probably hopefully no surprises here, but 85% of respondents believe more sidewalks and trails would improve physical and mental health. And I think what's more interesting here is these survey questions about I avoid exercising on major roads out of concern for my safety. More sidewalks and trails in Hopkinton would improve physical health and then mental health. Guessing we all can understand that one. We asked them, how strongly do you agree with the following statements? Hopkinton provides better pedestrian connectivity than our neighboring towns. And you'll see some mix there. That I would prefer to invest town resources into sidewalks versus trails. And again, we were just trying to kind of get some understanding of where people want to see their money spent. But again, really not conclusive here. You've got a pretty strong balance of sidewalks and trails. Actually, I should think this. Maybe. Oh, it's not telling me. It's only on my screen. Age-old debate. What surface do we want these trails to be? So we asked the question, what is your preferred walking or running surface? You'll see this is with some color coding by type. So you'll see the fitness walkers and runners. Really any type, they don't care. If it's paved, that's great. A sidewalk is great. A paved path off road is great. A gravel or stone dust, great. Single track, great. But they want to be off the road. Traveling to neighbors, you see a slight preference there for paved surfaces. And that could be because they have kids with scooters or just feel a little bit safer.
Don't get their shoes dirty.
Don't get their shoes dirty. And then I guess really the rest of these, you see some slight preference for paved surfaces, whether that be a sidewalk or a paved surface off the road. But again, also still, if it's a cart path or single track, there's still a preference for that over rural roads or main streets. We asked the question, how many times per week do you typically run or walk for fitness? And then we asked, how far do you typically walk or run in an outing? And we asked for this specific use, what ground surface do you prefer? So
You did not move up here. There we go.
And so frequency, you see a pretty good balance there, but most people in this survey group were at least a couple times per week. And if you think about it, you drive around town, who are the people you see out there? You see the people that are running or the people that are walking for fitness. So if they're a couple times a week, then that explains it.
Dogs.
Yeah, walking the dogs too. It's a good question. It's a good point. Distances there, you see that 2 to 4 mile range. And then again, on the path type or surface, and a lot of variability there. But in general, anything off the road, they're happy with. So this next set of survey, they're all the same questions. Traveling to other neighborhoods, and you see a little bit lower numbers here. And then you'll see certainly the distances are different. We surveyed them in different ways, but you see a pretty broad distribution there. Anywhere from a quarter mile to up to more than a mile. And then again, from a surface perspective, you see a preference for sidewalks and paved paths. Traveling to business. This is where we start to see a little bit of variation. I think people expect to walk to their neighbors quite a bit or walk to another neighborhood. But walking businesses, just less frequency, almost roughly 2/3 of them are one time or fewer per week. Maybe they walking to dinner or they're going for coffee on Saturday morning or something like that. Distances though, and what was interesting is that while we saw a lot of variation in walking to neighborhoods, generally distance is a little bit shorter. If they were going to walk to a business, while less frequent, they were willing to walk further. So as we think about sort of how we build out from these anchors of these resources, And hopefully it gives a little bit of insight. And then traveling to school, and again, the sample size is a little bit different here. This is only 144 because that was based on the people that would walk to schools. You know, again, you see lower frequency than the fitness group. But I'd argue that's because the fitness people will dress for the weather. If you're going to school, you're running late. You know, all of my kids sometimes walk to school, sometimes they take the bus, sometimes they get a ride. It varies.
5 degrees out, the t-shirt that you gotta wear is not gonna cut it for you.
But I did think it was interesting with school, though. Again, people were willing to walk further than I would have expected. And maybe that's because there's not that many people that live within a quarter mile of the schools.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that the requirement for the bus though? Like, yeah, there was this thing in our neighborhood, right, Gary?
Yeah, not anymore though.
Well,
If you're 8th grade or below, it's free for everybody.
Right, but you remember when our kids started, you had to pay for the bus if you were within a mile? And I'm just thinking if that's the correlation.
Could be.
Was it a mile or 2 miles? I mean, I
It's a
thought,
mile and a half or.
oh, was it? Yeah.
I thought it was a mile.
I thought it was a mile too.
Okay.
Doesn't matter, most of them get ride, especially when they're high school.
And then not to forget, our friends, the cyclists, you know, and I think, some interesting things here for me in particular, but, you know, again, I mean, 1 to 3 times per week was 75% of the respondents. You know, distances, 3 to 10 miles was the most prominent. And then, you know, you see, paved path away from the road, was the strongest preference here, you know, followed by a bike lane, followed by gravel cart path, single track and rural road were all pretty consistent, but, as a cyclist, I look at this and say, well, it depends what kind of cyclist you are.
Right.
If you're, you know, with your kids and you're going to go ride around, then, you know, 3 to 5 miles might be pretty good. For me, I don't like bike paths. I think I'm safer on the road than I am on a bike path. It's just the type of riding that I do, and a bike path, you get a lot of,
Traffic.
you know, a lot of walkers
Walkers
with dogs with elastic leashes. like,
Traffic, yeah.
People that aren't aware, that have headphones on, they're walking, it's just a little, so, but a lot of variability there. I don't know if you guys can read all of these, but,
Just highlight a few of the key ones.
yeah, I mean, safety is paramount, no surprise, everyone thinks about that. There's some interesting comments around even, you know, using guardrails to protect sidewalks, and I think of the loop road as an example where the guardrail is between the sidewalk and the street. Wider, what else do we have here? That's interesting. We have enough sidewalks and trails, need to get people using them. Connect the ones that we have. Some people didn't like the survey. Maintain the ones we have, and then I think some opinions there. And then we just asked if they had suggested areas, and, you know, connect to the Milford Rail Trail. There's a lot of opinions around the Upper Charles Trail here, so that kind of dictated a lot of the open comments. But, you know, I think in most situations, what we saw was a desire to connect to existing infrastructure. So for us, we had some recommendations, and that was, you know, trail loops, 2 to 5 miles, 2 to 4 miles, somewhere in that range. That just seemed like the sweet spot that people really valued. You know, in the interest of paved versus unpaved, our thought was that, you know, there's a story to invest in paved infrastructure, particularly where it stems from downtown and around schools. That's where we saw the greatest preference for pavement, and you know, just felt like it was more in line with sort of town design and plans. But then trails should have varied surface. Again, it's it's like a lake. To me, like there's some lakes that allow jet skis, some that allow power boats, some that allow only sailboats, some that allow only paddling. But if you have a mix, then that kind of gives people options to self-select into what they like and they prefer. And then some other things around improved safety features, particularly on high travel roads. Visibility improvements or trees and shrubs, and other means of improving safety. So that is that's it.
Well done.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's like I said, I don't want to lose things. And this, I think, did a good job of getting some idea of people's interest. As someone who's a stone dust trail person, I argued with Gary a little bit about this. The term gravel to me, I wouldn't necessarily want trails that are gravel. I look at that like a cart path. Stone dust is sort of a prepared surface that has a much broader use, so it's a different thing. So I would have had another category in here, but is what it is. And I think there's still a lot of value in this type of survey.
Fran. Oh,
Depending what a single track is supposed to be in reference to.
hey, Fran.
For one person.
They're usually a little bit more rugged.
So
Yes.
Go friendly.
Yeah, so just Fran, we're just finishing up. Sorry, Gary's gone through his presentation, which think you've seen a couple of times, and sort of talking about the results.
Hey, Fran, it's only wide enough for one.
Gary?
then on the question of the bike to that, I mean, mountain bikers do indeed go on those trails, but most other people that are riding bikes don't. It's a completely different biking situation.
Yeah, it depends on how rocky it is too.
Right.
Sure.
Can you go back to slide 13, Gary, please? The one where you had the suggested areas.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned that we're already doing the chestnut, right? That's in the works. And I think there's rumblings of EMC or marathon now.
So that was approved as well. So,
Yeah.
the
So I think that's-
new Fish Lane, which again, the beauty of it is that opens up the entire, Blueberry
Neighborhood to that area.
straight into the schools. I mean, that's it took me a few years ago, I discovered the little single track path through there. I'm like, wow, this just opens up a whole bunch of running loops. I mean, it's
Yeah.
pretty nice. And now it'll be paved and,
I mean,
more accessible, but you just look at, given the kids in those neighborhoods a way to get to school, it's fantastic.
Well, no, I'm just thinking out loud that it is good to know about the 2 to 4 mile loop, right?
Yeah,
That's really good to know.
That's right.
And then
That was the key.
and if you take the population of the town, you say town, the schools, and then you draw a 1 mile diameter around it, and then a 2 mile, and 3 mile, et cetera. And then I would think that would be our prioritization for trails if we're gonna extrapolate anything from this.
Well, but the other piece is sort of from the, around Lexington or across Lexington type program where people are doing loops. So, to the point with the Blueberry connection, that then allows you trail sidewalk that connects the schools. You can go down Hayden Row, you can go down Chestnut Street into the wild Thayer Heights neighborhood, and that's probably a 2-3 mile loop. For that whole neighborhood then has that available to them. And folks from Ash Street can come in and use it as well. So for us to be looking at, that's obviously a sidewalk only loop, but that's a trail, to some people that's important to have that. But I think we can be putting some of those kind of networks together to help increase usership.
Well, that's what I was
Hey,
thinking.
this is where I can walk.
Right. It's all about the connectivity, right?
Yeah.
another thing that we talked about a lot in the Upper Charles Trail was having the Upper Charles Trail from Hopkinton to Milford, and then having these tons and tons of spur trails to tie into the neighborhoods. and existing trails, other trails that we already have.
Did you specifically ask people about dog walkers too? I think Ken.
We did, no.
Okay. And then one of the other things that I found interesting, and again, I think the blueberry is a good piece of it. Chestnut also gets at this, is what you'll see a lot of times is parents dropping kids off in the morning, but then the kids walking home from school. So that's something to be kind of cognizant. And I think parents are, you know, getting the kid up and having them walk from like the Conley Hills neighborhood where it's probably a little over a mile to the school.
Gotta get up that much earlier.
The kids aren't gonna walk that. And yeah, if it's gorgeous and the parents have to, but it fits in parents' schedule too. If you're going into Boston, you can grab the kid, drop him to school, go in, but you're not gonna get out and be available to pick them up at 2 or 3 o'clock. But if it's a nice day, yeah, just walk home, kid. You know, and then so that's the other thing for us to be kind of aware of in our thinking. It's like, all right, there's, you know, these one directional walks that may be important. Chestnut was a particular concern. I mean, we had a kid get hit crossing that street, doing exactly that. Although,
You know, one other example that I think about too, and that, so I live on Chamberlain Street. The volume of runners and walkers that we get is incredible. But you know, why? Well, the center trail comes out there, reasonably light traffic, but then you get the cross-country teams run, the track team runs. And I, you know, but again, you get these loops. And that becomes kind of a means for people that are out for fitness. I mean,
They're going to have the connectivity.
all different types, yeah. And again, I look at that though as a good example where you have people that are using stone dust trails. Maybe they'll venture off and they'll go over into the new, Chamberlain neighborhood where there's some single track. But like people like a
They'll find a
mix.
way.
They like a mix.
but your street does do that. It connects a lot of different things.
Yes.
Just does.
I mean, yeah, I'm kind of curious what percentage of the people on Chamberlain go towards down Colella Farms towards Teresa.
Because it's a nice walk.
Be-
When I was running, I used to do that all the time.
I think it's a lot, actually.
Yeah.
I
You
mean,
can go,
that same as Gary's
Two
talking
hours.
about.
You can connect into Loop Road, which is also a
Yeah.
great place in the wintertime because it's always paved and there's light traffic on it. And
Now, regarding that connectivity, probably it'd still even be better if there was a connection from, the community there off Chamberlain more directly to the Hopkins School.
say anything.
Yeah, Sanctuary, yeah.
No, there is. You can go through there.
What?
There is a little trail.
Yeah, but it's kind of,
But you're not supposed to.
they're not supposed to.
No, you're not supposed to.
So again, if you were supposed to, that would.
It's private property.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
And Sanctuary people have resisted it.
Well, it's mostly because of the kids.
Right.
Did they really?
yes, they did. I thought,
In that case, if they really voted to open it up, we ought to make it a.
I think because you get so much negative,
Right.
bad people
You know what?
to it.
So the reason they were against it is because there were some people that were being disrespectful. And, people had new plants and their plants were getting trampled. And what's interesting about it though, is that as soon as you sort of, someone went in and kind of cleared out a path and that sort of started funneling people through that area, then all of a sudden they stopped looking for ways to get through that little section and they all used the trail. So it kind of funneled the traffic and then the problems went away.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The
And
resistance
then
went-
we heard, again, like the neighbors, I mean, they like seeing
like it.
kids and walkers. I mean, I think back to, my neighbor across the street, she's a widow. I mean, she loves seeing the people walk the dogs and run and, like, it's just like, even for her, she's otherwise alone. She sits out in the front, waves and chats to everybody. And, I was sort of trying to tell people like, what I always hated even on Charles Trail is the resistors to rail trails, sort of negativity associated with it. And my opinion, I think, like, show me a place where pedestrian traffic is problematic. I mean,
They resist it until it's built and then they love it.
even,
It's the feedback you get.
Bill Diane is an example. You know, he was not happy about the center trail going in.
No, but now he loves it. One of the big proponents.
Yeah.
The Milford Trail, condominium didn't want it, that because the builders offered to build a path from their condominium association. And they didn't have anything to do with it until it was built, and then they came back and asked for it.
From the trails conferences, you hear a lot of that of,
You hear an awful
you know,
lot about that.
when the trail is going in, if it's on town land and it has to go in after the neighbors have been all up in arms about it, the major discussion is about how thick can you make the fence
Yeah.
and how big
We
you
get
can
it.
make
Can
the
we get
fence.
a
And can
gate now?
make, yes, and exactly, then, you know, as soon as it's in, that
They
becomes
demand
the
the
issue. It's like,
fence.
how do I get
The
there
gate.
to it? Because you put this great fence up that I required, and now I want a gate in it. Can you put the gate in for me now?
So, and by the way, that's one of the reasons this is so important for the planning board is, you know, even, for example, the backside of EMC to Blueberry on Fitch Lane, we pushed hard to get that in before that neighborhood got built out. Because now if people are moving in, the trail's already there, it's a non-issue. But if the houses are built, people move in and then the trail goes in.
And also we work with the developer to give the right of way right to the road. Between a couple houses.
By the way, on that, there's only one access to EMC that, off of Blueberry. There's not a second one, like from Thayer Heights to the new, school that's being built there. So if you're over there by Wild and you want to get to the new school, you can't get there, right? Still.
But yeah, it's still, can happen. It's
Yeah, the town land is over there, so yeah, there's not a sidewalk constructed.
But there's not I mean, I would think that would be a priority connection for the
Yeah.
reasons we're discussing.
I've talked to Start Line, so it bumps up to Start Line land, and they're willing to.
Well, Start Line's going out to Hayden Road, but I'm talking like from there.
No, but to back, to back
To get from their heights
That's all
to the
town
school.
land.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so where Fitch is going in,
yeah.
there's publicly available land, if you include Start Line land, from like a cul-de-sac. So there is an access, potential access on the Wild,
Let it be
Yeah.
said, there's a lot of planning yet to
but
do.
not from Wild, no, but from,
From Thayer Heights, right?
not from, yeah, when you're talking over from Wild, there's not,
Right, because there's houses out at the end of Walk.
there is sort of a weird,
I think there's a
cul-de-sac with one house on it.
Brian Lane maybe or something like that.
Yes, that has. It's one of those where the deed is kind of weird. It says the town has access to typical uses.
Right,
It connects to conservation land the town owned, and it was the only connection to that conservation land for a long time.
right.
But, you know, what is, the town has access for kind of, you know, whatever use of the development would have. It's kind of a, you know,
I should, I'll forward it to Peter because then, you know, we took this and then we went through and we did some prioritization. And again, it was mostly sidewalks. But, you know, we also did a lot of work with Steve Lewandowski, who is a great champion for this stuff, knows the town really well, and Peter with you, and we went through and we created some prioritization, and the original vision was that we'd be better at town meeting if we showed a broader plan, and then we, you know, proposed that, you know, in little bits and pieces. But in full disclosure, I think, you know, just with the financial tightness, it lost, and sidewalks are expensive. I mean, they're very expensive. So, yeah, but we looked at some other connector trails, even up in Legacy North down, and kind of connecting into the Liberty Mutual property. We looked at some other places that, again, just kind of,
It sounds,
creating loops,
that sounds pretty easy though, that one. right?
short and easy.
yeah.
I mean, especially if you started with just playing a single track, if you want to call it that.
There's trails all the way through Lexi Farms now.
Yeah,
Although,
but there's
although
an easy
the funny thing
connection.
about single track is that the people that use single track
Yeah,
have a strong preference for single track.
yeah, but
Charlesview is a good example.
Yes, it is.
You know, it's,
actually, I don't know. Which trails are you talking about as single track there?
Well, I mean, there's the Joseph to the Hughes Trail, that's single track. And then you have the loops that are off the Hughes track. That is single track.
back in the old Terry land, there's a lot of single track.
That is all single track, but that's private property.
Yeah, a lot of that's private. Yeah. So you're not talking about the Chamberlain Waylet extension that's been worked on now. That,
The trip, no.
yeah.
One other thing, while I'm thinking of it, is you also did what was that? An online meeting to kind of get public input, which was interesting. Is, what were your kind of takeaways from that? I'll give you my line asking was that one person or a couple of people kind of hijacked it and focused it on, how do we get across the, from one side of Lake Maspinock to the other, and how do we build a bridge there? And unfortunately, it seemed to get,
No, I remember that.
but we, what were you hoping to get out of that?
Bridge over Pat Maspinock.
Well, just along the causeway.
From the Maspinock,
Yeah.
from the Maspinock, I mean, that neighborhood is really cut off by 495.
Right.
And that was one of the things we had talked about was, how do you build a safer pedestrian crossing? And you can make a really strong case for it because, you have a big apartment complex. And then across 495, you have the grocery store and some restaurants and, it's like how, but nobody wants to, a cloverleaf on-ramp and off-ramp is about as dangerous as it gets for pedestrians and bicycles. So,
Yeah. That's a really long one as well.
Yep.
Along
Yeah,
Main Street.
It works in Milford because of how it's set up.
But Milford is also a half cloverleaf.
Yes.
I thought
Yeah.
a cloverleaf.
Yeah, no, but even then you've got lights in places that make it convenient
Yeah.
and safe, that increase the
A
safety
lot
where-
of-
in a way that you just don't have in Hopkinton.
It's awareness, it's signage, it's education.
Well, I apologize. I should have brought that because we had a map of other sort of options that we considered.
They were prioritized.
Yeah, and we kind of, I mean, literally, we laid out, I probably have it at home.
I'd like to see it personally.
Yeah. Maybe I'll go home and see if I can find it.
Yeah.
While you guys are meeting, I'll just
Mhm.
bring it back. Because it's color coded. It's just sort of, we're looking at existing sidewalks, and then where we can connect that infrastructure. And like, again, Chestnut, the rationale there was that, the Springwood neighborhood
Right.
is completely isolated.
And if you walk through that Springwood neighborhood, you eventually come to town property that borders College Street.
Right, yeah. We used to be able to go all the way through there.
You
It's,
still can,
oh,
but
On
it's
trail.
rough, yeah.
It's not, it's,
It's doable.
but that trail isn't marked as being public, right? The one that goes off of,
From
Little Eagle Road down to.
yeah,
It's
Yeah.
town-
But it's not. Yeah,
it's not marked as private.
It's
No.
Not marked.
It's just plain not marked, but we could mark it. That would
Right,
be
it's just a trap.
like a sign.
It's just true.
And that's an example where, gosh, like I've been running more down in College Rock and that just keeps me off of Hayden Row.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. It's like-
Broke my arm on that trip.
Nice or,
On a bike.
on a bike.
where you go-
Just a little off topic, but
There's many places to
the
do that.
intersection of Chamberlain and Hayrow, Harry was able to design the sidewalk, except for the last, I think it's 200 feet of the intersection, because she ran out of money and she really didn't want to tackle the,
Oh, in Chestnut?
yeah, to the lights, which I thought was disappointing. That's really what we really needed it.
You mean the sidewalk's not gonna go all the way up the Hidden Road? It's gonna stop like at Wild?
Well, it's because
No,
there is a
it's
sidewalk from Hayden Road to Wild.
But she's stopping it, I think, about 200 feet before the intersection. In the infrastructure, she had to change drainage pipes or something. She didn't want to do it. I thought that was sad. And basically, she said she ran out of money too. But that can be tackled later
Later.
if we keep it in mind.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
I
that's,
think we would want to tackle that before construction begins.
yeah, well, the other thing is, it's supposed to be sidewalk to go from,
Smith or Given?
well, no, Blueberry, the Blueberry into the school, that's supposed to be hard sidewalks.
Yeah.
And that could just as easily be stone dust. It's flat.
Yeah.
And the stone dust would work and would be a lot less than you take the money and then build all the way out to Chestnut. I think
Yeah,
it's a
except
great
you
spot
can't-
for stone
the
dust.
problem with that, Peter, is that you can't plow it in the winter, and these kids are gonna need to have it
Typically.
plowed, you know?
Not always. Sometimes,
would be
yes, but,
nice.
but sometimes you actually can plow it here.
Center Trail was iced up all. This winter.
This winter, a few times, definitely.
Anyway, we digress.
So you guys have the slides. How long have you been
You
here?
got
So-
this present.
We'll be here till 9. Yeah, great.
Nine?
No, we appreciate it. That's exactly what I wanted to get out of this, is kind
Yeah.
of make sure that information didn't get lost and kind of for us to use it as
Right.
something to keep in the back of our mind as we're, looking at the trail system. Okay, 2 to 4 miles is your, your
I
sweet
always have
spot.
that overlaps with the prioritization. I bet
Right.
that would be helpful.
And just one last point too, like one of the things, the other place it started from is, there was a proposal that we needed a sidewalk down Wood Street. And, it's interesting, like, well, there's a fair amount of traffic and, as far as a spine, that might be really, really useful. But what we realized is that doesn't really open up these shorter loops that are what people are looking for.
Right.
And so if it's not a loop, then it's an out and back, and that's just less interesting. People are less likely to use it. And so, we kind of deprioritized some of those things.
That was useful.
But that's where I think it was, because we could spend a couple $1 million on the sidewalk on Wood Street, but
Mm.
to me, it ends up being,
Right, you connect Woodville to downtown and you get
what do you get for it?
2 users a week. Who aren't people who would bike it anyway or run on it. Cause it's pretty wide, pretty safe.
But definitely some streets like Benville, Chamberlain.
know you, it just dawned on me.
Chamberlain is so good because where I come from, if I take the Center Trail to the Loop Road, if you go out to Chamberlain, you have all kinds of options. You can go right, you can go into the whole new development, you can go up. So there's a small stretch there. You can go down into, what's the, yeah, you can go down you can go down into Charlesview. You can go all different ways. You can all of a sudden you route by anywhere from 3 miles to 10 miles very easily. But it's that small stretch of Chamberlain that allows that to happen.
You're my favorite runner. And it's because I don't know where your daughter lives now, but I have 3
Yeah, she
daughters.
just called me. She lives in LA.
And I was always so envious that your daughter would always run with you. I have 3 girls.
Oh,
Inspiration, my oldest daughter, she and I just ran the Barcelona half marathon. And that was her first race she's ever run. So
My goodness gracious.
I always dreamed of I hope that one of my girls
You
will
run
run
that-
with me.
you
Like
run-
this guy that I see in the mornings for eternity.
did you go down the Ramos? It's like, how does it go through Barcelona?
It's all in the
Well,
flash.
she just, last weekend, she ran the LA marathon.
Yeah.
So that's one of my proudest things. I got her to be, she's a lifelong runner.
I know. I knew when she was home from college because I was always driving and I always go by and his daughter's home because she's, there'd be months where she wasn't there and then she was there. And
Right.
so not that I'm stalking you, but
No,
it just dawned on me, it just realized who you are.
I met you not to continue this, but I met your wife at Blue Square Pizza one day, and she said the same thing.
So you've inspired, you inspire a lot of
There you
people.
go. There you go.
Yeah, thank you. So, I'm gonna see if I have it electronically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
And we'll figure it out. I don't know if I'm gonna come back this
yeah,
week.
yeah.
There's some work to do too.
Well,
Yeah.
we can talk. Just not bad to keep it up the top conversation going forward. But appreciate it. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, Gary.
Nice to see you guys.
Yeah,
Fran, safe travels.
good luck with your
Bro, good.
upcoming race.
Thanks,
Gary.
Okay. Yeah, I thought like I said, I think it's important to kind of keep that information as we're kind of working through our stuff. All righty, getting back, updates. We have done nothing in Ash Street parking. Did you by any chance look at the regs or any of that stuff? Because I was going to send it to you.
No, I I'm not even sure where to start.
Okay, all right, I can help you get started, but, point you at, some of it's state regs you gotta look at for the, shade tree, and then the other is the town bylaws with regard to scenic road requirements. And what we need to add to a package to bring to those folks. Meeting logistics for the Upper Charles Trail Sidewalk, Miss May, I think, sort of, any updates on what we talked about last time? We're gonna
So-
park in that main parking lot on
Yeah.
Legacy.
So I did walk it, and
Okay.
it took about an hour, both ways.
Oh, both road.
So I did not walk the piece from that same parking lot down to Tennessee Gas through Legacy Farms, down to East Main Street. I did not walk that. However, I expect that to take longer. And expect that to take an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Okay, so you just walked the piece from there over to the,
I wanted to make sure it was clear and that we could get around. We won't be able to do the exact speculated trail, but because there was just too many pucker brushes, but we can walk to the side of it.
where's the parking again?
It's the parking lot that is closest to Wilson Street. It's across from one of the roads though. I'll have to get the name of the road. I can.
Yeah, so you're thinking of starting on Wilson Street then, right?
Starting at the parking lot on Legacy North.
It's right near the
Yeah.
Tennessee gas
Yeah,
pipeline.
yeah.
So if you look at the yellow
From that
pipes,
parking lot, you're right, it's pretty overgrown to get to
yeah,
there.
we can get around it, but
It's funny, if you start all the way over on Wilson Street, then the road that goes right along Tennessee gas is completely open and easily walkable.
so the
And that goes
piece,
Way to East Main easy, but that's all, it's not a lot longer, it's a little bit longer.
Where are you talking?
yeah, no,
Okay, so there's a road, there's a publicly, I think it's a public road that goes out to Wilson Street, and close to Legacy Farms North. So if you go down Wilson from Legacy, north towards Main Street,
I know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
Yes, however, you can get there too, from the parking lot, but there is some weeds that
There's-
you'll have to go through.
It-
However, that will only
it's more
take
ground,
you-
yeah.
Yeah, that'll only take you about down to where the Serenity House used to be. And then from there, it's really rough.
Oh.
Have you taken that
Yeah,
walk back there?
yeah, no, I thought it was amazingly clear.
Did you find the old cart trails?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
but
That's not exactly
so-
where the trail is going to go, but we could probably point it out.
yeah, so starting from Tennessee Gas itself, so where Serenity was, if you start from that,
Serenity's off of Wilson. You remember that was?
yes,
Off of Wilson.
that's on the other side of Tennessee Gas from
Yeah.
where I was talking. the
Right.
first time. The trail that goes, towards your place,
Yeah.
from there is in great shape. As if somebody mowed it recently.
Yeah, they kept, I ran through there.
There was one fallen tree, right? But you can easily get over that fallen tree.
Oh, that's
You
good.
Step it over. You know,
So
it's a
you-
big tree like this, big around.
You're thinking, but I would think it's at least an hour and a half both ways.
Well, from the parking lot to, and then back, it's probably an hour and a half.
That's
But
what I'm thinking.
if you're saying from the parking lot to Main Street,
So-
then-
Decide
So where do we-
if
so I
you
think-
want to do the whole piece, or if you want to break it up into sections is what I was going to suggest,
Mhm.
depending on the weather, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, depending on whether what
Depending who shows up.
people have.
Yeah,
Yeah, because there's really two pieces. So from what used to be Rafferty Road, which is now Legacy
right.
North, if you take that, say, if you start at Route 85, Cedar Street, take Rafferty, Rafferty Road is now Legacy Farms North. Bump the intersection with Wilson, you keep going on Legacy Farms North, you drop into kind of a hollow Okay, yeah. There's a pond on the right and you, as you come up, you'll see a parking lot on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
So if we start there, that can work away, but we probably should come in from the other side and flag it to some degree, sort of the general idea of where it is.
Yeah, I do think there's brambles between that parking lot that's right there at the gas line on Legacy Farms North and the Tennessee gas trails, which are
The other
really old.
piece, there was another way to access that same trail without going through the bramble.
Yeah,
And that's just to go down
Yeah.
Legacy
Yeah,
Farms
that's
where
true. That's
the roads are
That's true. A
and
little further, yeah.
stay on their road and it hooks into the back
Then there's ways through, yeah.
Yeah, so, but if we plan on meeting
at that parking
at
lot.
that parking lot.
We have to do it that
Yellow
way.
pipes are.
Yeah, we have to
Yellow
do it that
pipes.
way.
And we can figure it from there.
We said the 13th.
Yeah,
Yes,
things
it's
at one, I think.
it's a Sunday, 1
Yeah.
o'clock. It's Palm
I
Sunday.
made a big mistake. That's my daughter's birthday, so I may not be able
You
to.
may not be available.
But I don't know. I'm see what time we have a birthday party, so I didn't want to admit that, so, but I had to.
Well, you can admit it to us, just not at home.
On television.
Sorry, it's too late.
I know, but anyway. I don't know how I forgot that.
Yeah, and we can, we can also decide at that point whether we want to do the section over to East Main. That may be in some ways more open and easier.
Sure.
Um, You know,
So is it closer to Wilson or is it closer to North?
it's on Legacy North.
We can't easily pull a map onto that thing,
I meant to pull up.
I'm looking on it, my phone right now, and it just,
So, yeah, can you expand and see what the roads are?
Yeah.
Off of Legacy North. So if you're coming from Wilson on Legacy North, there's the first
I'm on Wilson or on Legacy North?
Legacy North.
Yes,
So coming from Wilson, there's a first left-hand,
Weston Lane.
okay, and then the next one up from there's should be a big gap, and then the next one that goes left off there is called what?
That's just a spur road. It goes to Wilson. Right? So you just gotta, if I'm going from Wilson,
Line,
From 85.
from 85 on Wilson or in Legacy?
Legacy Farms.
All right, so if I'm going from, this is Legacy North, right? Legacy North, I'm going up. And then I'm at Spruce, that's Spruce.
huh?
And then that Spruce is a loop.
Okay, maybe Spruce.
Spruce is a loop.
Do you see the gas pipeline?
I see Tennessee right here.
Okay, okay,
That's Tennessee on Wilson. For the intersection of Wilson and Legacy.
yeah, so.
That's where
Legacy.
Tennessee.
Yeah, so this is Legacy here.
Yes, this is Legacy.
Okay, keep.
And this is Wilson,
This way. So what's that right here?
Walnut.
Okay, so the parking lot is there.
That,
Yes, that's it.
Yeah. So
It's
right
parking
across,
lot is up, so.
directly across from Walnut,
Wal-
off of Legacy.
Oh, thank
Walnut
you.
Way.
That's it. Very good on that.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll just meet there and make a game day decision. If it's pouring down rain, the game day decision may be check your emails.
Yeah.
Um,
But if it's just drizzling or something, maybe just want to wear your
Yeah,
boots.
yeah.
There you go.
Not done anything with regard to road sign, plan is to get on the schedule. I've got sort of piling up a list of things to talk to Elaine about. That would be one of them, is to get on their agenda and say, hey, we want to do this. Test some road signs out. What do you think?
Oh, if it's okay, just to step back once.
Yeah.
I'll take care of bringing some maps so we have something, or maybe people just want to use their phones. I don't know. I can take care of getting the maps.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. it's- Okay, update on actions by other boards, committees, and trail center groups, item 3. So. Couple of items. One was I did talk to Elaine and finalize that our budget is $30,000 for this year, so that is
Good.
that's set. Um, and then with regard to the Open Space Preservation Committee, we have a volunteer day scheduled for April 5th, I think it is, a Saturday. First Saturday of the month. It's the third one that we're doing in the Colella, the new Colella land right next to Hughes. So that,
Are you talking about Dell?
Yeah.
The Dell one is the 5th. At least I thought it was.
I think they're moving,
Oh, that's, no, it should be during a weekday.
I thought it was during the weekday, so I think that may be 4/4. Fourth,
It could be.
yeah, so then the fifth is on that cow run in Colella. It's sort of
That's on the 12th. It's the 5th.
it should be the fifth, because it's the volunteer day is the first
Yeah, you want to coordinate it with.
first Saturday each month. So yeah, I think it's the fourth and the fifth. But in any event, the issue that came out of that is Chuck Doshy got going with a little extra cleaning. They're clearing down towards the road, and a neighbor reached out to our open space admin to say who's working on private property, which we weren't working on private property.
I'm sorry, the town's new,
But
open space.
It was a good reminder that ultimately that is a trail that we're putting in. We have procedures in place for when we do a development of a new trailer, an upgrade to existing to let the neighbors know. And so that's something that we need to look at it more closely and sooner rather than later.
How did you notify the neighbors? Was it the old fashioned knock and drop off a notice or?
We would do mailings
Okay,
to abutters, and then we would have, what we would do is, where the procedure we set up was, mailings to the neighbors, and then have a meeting. And as part of reaching out to neighbors, it's like, tell your neighbors about it.
now did the town help with the distribution of the mailing of the letters?
It was all, it's all town. No, but we volunteers did it. We didn't have town staff doing it, but we purposely did not do sort of anything really formalized as in, 300 feet, everyone within 300 feet of this or 1,000 feet needs to be notified, because you can run into situations, particularly like with the school, where you have a big piece of property, you're working on one side over here, and you have to, notice this large number of people, most of whom have no idea what you're working on and could care less. You're half a mile from their house. What do they care if you're working on a trail over there? So the idea was to do something to make sure that
The meeting
Anyone-
neighborhoods.
anyone local knew about it. Who would have a concern was noticed, and to be broader, in general, to be broader, so that we would talk as a group about, hey, here's who we're looking at contacting. Do we think there ought to be other folks involved? Generally seem to work out, pretty well. We sometimes not so much fun as a presenter, because you'd get, definitely a couple of things that got some pretty serious pushback, but you felt like you'd reached everybody and everyone's voice were heard. In particular, I noted when we put the trail in, the Cranberry Bog Trail, which goes from behind Center School over to Elmwood Farm down in the woods, sort of paralleling Ash Street, if you will, but down at the base of the hill, and it was one neighborhood. And basically they were, let us know when you're going to be doing it. We'd love to help. Sure, you can get access down to our property. This is great
So what are the action items for Colella?
for Colella.
Yeah.
In terms of
Outreach.
outreach, it's just putting that note together, getting it out to them. And given the short timing, what I'll do is I'll put the note together, send it out to everybody. Because again, I've got templates that we've used in the past and say, hey, anything I'm missing. And then
I'm thinking there's gonna be at least 20, maybe 30 properties that abut it.
yeah,
Jerome was talking a mile, right?
Well,
Not a mile,
between the
maybe
Hayden
3.
Road and
Well, Hayden Row is all not
Teresa.
that many, not that many. It's all Teresa.
yeah, for this, it's more for,
there's a half a dozen on Hayden Road. That are on their back.
And I was thinking 20, 30 properties.
yeah. For the work on 5.5, where we're not actually building a trail, it's sort of the first pass, and we really haven't heard anything, Creaser Road neighbors. The issue has been Hayden Row, so I think we just limit it for this, again, which is clearing, it's not trail building, but it's for a reminder that when we actually do, when you and Chuck go out and flag the trail and say, here's where it's gonna be, we absolutely have to go.
Oh, I just want to make sure it's mapped, excuse the pun, it's mapped out on what we should be doing, when we should be doing it.
Right. Because where it's gonna matter to the folks on Teresa is how far off those houses are we putting it? And that's where it's really critical to get their input. And
I
they
understand that, but what's the concern of the folks on Hayden Road?
He was working, there's a small piece there that's an easement on private property, and I think he was working close to that individual's property.
Join the meeting. To there.
But suppose they did that, then what?
Yeah.
Then
So where the cow path ends and you have to connect it over?
The town owns an easement actually out to Hayden Rose
we
Street,
have to be in the.
which we're not planning on using, but yeah, where you connect it over to Hughes. And we'll probably just stay away from that for this event. But I think the time for outreach to those individuals is now. Time for outreach to the Teresa Road folks is, once we've done a little more planning, the trails are flagged in the woods, and then we can talk to them and say, hey, you can go out and take a look at the flagging, see what's out there. If you have thoughts, comments, concerns, that's the time.
There's a lot of work to do up there, I think.
There is. And it's, we're clearing invasives out of the cow path. We're not putting in establishing a trail.
Right now.
Yeah.
So-
And again, if we're looking long-term as doing a stone dust trail through that, again, that to me, there's sort of two phases. One is, we put it in as a single track initially, and then when we go to do a bigger thing, we actually have another meeting. We've done with the neighborhoods.
Yeah, that would work.
Just want to make sure we're consistent with the messaging, that's all.
Yep, and no, that's, it was kind of a reminder to me that, oh yeah, we've got to be paying attention to this because we did get that person reaching out to us, and it should always be the other way. Right, we're reaching out to them first.
Right, and when the Trails Club sent out the email doing the work event, it's possible that the map was indicating where the trail was going to be, which is not the case. I don't think that was the intent. But I think some people could get confused as to where the trail may end, where we haven't determined where it's going to go.
Right. So if you let me in, try to just get my map up here so we can see it.
Okay.
What we're talking about. There you go. Yeah, like handle it.
Oh, so now
Screen.
Yeah. And then your microphone.
that's the mic.
Wasn't it?
Oh, what's in it?
So,
Sorry.
So, well, anyway, action item on that is I'll send you folks out a note. Any comments? I'll send that out.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can't you figure it out? Like, can you just
Yeah,
check out?
right.
It's just stupid to talk about maps without showing the map on the screen. I'm
so you can.
Yeah, no, you're right.
That's
You're right.
Ken's action item, because
These stupid things so that it's exactly the opposite settings to share the screens through Google Share than it is through Zoom. That's what it is. Exactly backwards. I always do through Zoom. and-
One way's better. Just ask them, they'll tell you.
It was totally fun.
So, yeah, so sure.
So you're gonna send in, so just to be clear,
Right.
you're gonna draft a note that you're gonna send to the committee that is gonna be addressing the folks that are closest to Hughes.
Yeah.
Google.
right, or on
The Hayden Row Hughes area,
right,
that small group.
the 6 houses or whatever.
This is like 10.
And then at some point in time in the future, and this is presumably after we map out where the trail's gonna be,
Correct.
then we start the advocacy and say, or outreach, not advocacy, to the Teresa people.
To a larger audience. Hughes, the folks in Deer Run may be included as part of that, again, depending on what we're doing, that's one where again, we probably want to be a little more expansive.
I agree. I agree.
Okay. That's finishing up 3.
Okay, we
Um,
did 4.
and so we're on to 5, the continued discussion regarding next steps of listening sessions. And in public outreach.
Scott was doing some stuff on that one. He's not here tonight.
He was, and then also I think it was just, again, continuing a little bit brainstorming, but also action items. Where do we think we want to go with this? What groups?
What are we gonna do, realtors?
Realtors was certainly one that Jack talked to. I spent 10 minutes with Chuck Joseph on this. And, he feels that trails are absolutely an asset. I think he's, sort of aware of and he said, what he also mentioned for us is a reminder that the Hopkinton has a reputation as sort of this active community. That's something that people are looking for. And so trails can be a big, important, augmentation of that whole idea. People are looking to move to places where they can do active things. And I think the connectivity is helpful. Trails are helpful from that perspective. I mean, if they want more rural, then maybe you go to Upton. It's a good school system, so on, but that Hopkinton has the potential to have that balance. We've got a lot of, defined state parks, DCR land. We've got trails that connect all that, then it allows, with the good schools, you're moving here for your kids, but you also have these active things you can do.
I keep thinking that there's key properties that enable connectivity. If we had a better connection to realtors, whenever those properties are being sold, would be a perfect time for us to contact those realtors and make sure that any prospective buyer might know about, what the situation is. Ideally, we should be in a position to make a deal with the owner to maybe give them a cut in the price of the property for an easement or something like that.
That's gonna be a tough sell.
Yeah, I was gonna say, not to mention the fact you don't know what realtor is gonna be
No,
representing the
realtors-
seller.
Yeah, our experience with the realtors have been that they don't want to even talk about easements or trails to the new property.
Well, it
They
could,
just assume, especially with developers, what we've been more successful at is waiting for the planning board to receive a plan, and then we can negotiate with the builder
With the
But-
developer.
for
you're
trails.
talking about new space.
No. You said, reach out to realtors, and I said, well, there's plenty of realtors, you don't know. So let's just say this lot X is a good connector, right? And person A owns lot X.
Yes.
Which realtor is gonna represent person A? 100 people could be on there. So it's just like, which realtor do you want to contact of the 100?
I would say that how many realtors are active in the town?
Well, you see realtors all over the place. I mean, how many signs do you see?
Probably, but there's probably about a dozen that actually do most of the
That's
business.
what I would say.
Yeah, I would say.
I mean, when I
less than
say-
that in terms of the key players.
I think there's other, there's substance,
Yeah.
there's secondary
More,
ones
but-
beyond. I mean, and then you're right, you see their pictures all over the place, but I think there's a small enough number that we could contact them and just plain let them know what the key places are, would be important for connectivity.
Well, I was mostly just saying that
Yeah.
we talked to them to try and get an understanding about from their marketing perspective, how they perceive trails.
Right.
That's right.
And so that's where
It's related.
Cook's comment was, yeah,
And, you know,
they're an important part of an active community.
and they want, they want, if they think trails are important, when they have a prospective client, they're gonna try and talk about that. It's, I tell you, I go to the schools, there's a lot of connectivity in this town. I just wanted to see what they said. If they said, we don't care about that, then that's fine.
No, I
But,
think it's a great selling.
You know, that was more of the thing I was,
But the two are related. So, I mean, what you're wanting to do is a larger number of houses because, not all of them have this key connectivity issue, but all of the other houses that are anywhere near the connectivity one would benefit from the connection.
Right.
Right. And so, that would, if we, I'm still with you, and that if we talk to those people just about how useful it is to sell things, that gives us more power later to achieve the connections that I'm talking about that involve, easement considerations, either with existing property owners or I still think a key time is when they turn over. But maybe not.
Yeah, and you can do some of it afterwards. So for example, we talked earlier about the whole Chestnut Street sidewalk piece, which you need to connect down to Conley Hills. When I was on the planning board back in, the late 90s, they were doing one of the additions to the Conley Hills development. And there was talk of putting a road out to Hayden Row from Conley Hills. That was a desire because then you don't have a closed off network. But then the thoughts on that was, I think that traffic was just going to be crazy. We're adding another road out to Hayden Row.
you could also have them through a wetland,
There was a lot of wetland.
significant wetland.
There was a lot of wetlands on that whole side. Correct. But end of the day, they decided not to do it. And I think probably for all those reasons. But from a trails perspective, if you do that, if that Chestnut Street loop goes in, now if you wanted a 4-mile loop, you can take that route down to it's Oak Street. There's town property at the end of that. And now there's a trail, an existing trail, walking trail there that connects to the back of Cornell Fields, Cornell's. And when you go to Cornell's, then you can cross over and there's no sidewalk across from you, but you've only got like 50 feet till you get to the sidewalk on Hayden Row. So that's an easy 50-foot addition, a sidewalk down across from Cornell's. May make some sense. And then that becomes that longer loop or, just an alternative loop for folks. Park at Cornell's, go for a nice 4-mile walk and end up at Cornell's.
But wouldn't it be better for us to kind of start to prioritize where the connectivity is? And when we first started these meetings, we started talking about, I forget the term used, but the grand map of the big map of the big master plan, right?
Mhm.
We were, Gary tonight said that, listen, they came up with what they thought was the priority for that connectivity. And then Ken, you're talking about, listen, if we can improve the connectivity to all these trails through potential, optimizing when there's a real estate turn.
Yeah.
Right. I want to bubble us back up to that master plan, Sarah. What does that look like? Because I don't want to just go on random kind of searches and, raffles, if you will. It just.
Yeah, but it becomes an interesting chicken and egg thing because if a property is available going in, you got to jump on it because if you don't,
I'm not
it's
saying that.
theirs. But
That's not what I'm saying.
But you're right, you've got to have
Right.
started that. And I think
Right.
Gary has a big map that we can maybe use. for
Well, I
that.
think there's stuff that's already out there that we
Right.
could potentially leverage.
Mhm.
And I just want to make sure that we're focusing on the right priorities.
Mhm.
I don't know how you do it, but that stretch of road on Chamberlain by his house, if you don't think about that piece of why that is significant. But it does, it ties, there are people on there all the time running on that stretch of road. There's no sidewalk. But they're always on it. And why are they doing it? Because they can use it to connect to all other kinds of things. What are the characteristics of that piece of road that make it a real node for connectivity? It just works.
And secondary to that, to your point, is at some point when all those cars are coming out of those neighborhoods, it may get to the point where you really don't want to be running and walking on the road And so that then does become something that bubbles up to,
Well, I was gonna say, it goes back, I wouldn't be surprised if Chamberlain or something close to Chamberlain is on that prioritization map like area is,
right.
right? And then they're looking at a 4 mile loop,
Mhm.
right, or a 2 to 4 mile loop, I think is the term, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, right now Chamberlain's doesn't have enough traffic. And so that it actually is fairly comfortable to run, right?
Mhm.
And to bike on it even. More so than a lot of other roads, anyway.
Right, and I think,
Relatively
so
flat.
Jack, that you brought up last meeting, where you said you were talking to somebody, they didn't know that they could get from Center Trail to Loop Road or something along those lines. Did you say that? Somebody brought it up at the last meeting.
Well, but yeah, people don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big thing. People don't know if you get on the Center Trail off West Main there, that you can go off to the Loop Road. They just don't know. They don't know where it goes.
Well, that's it. And so,
It's a sign thing.
well, it's not just a sign thing, but that's the grand, like, you keep bringing up Lexington and how you have these loops, right? And I think the combination of all this needs to be put together to help us prioritize.
Mhm.
But that's where I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean, like the Chamberlain Road piece is something that people who use it, that area a lot, figure out. Right?
Mhm.
If you take the Senate Trail, and then you take the continuation on to Chamberlain, you get down there. If you're interested in, it's a runner. If you're interested in running, you know, it just opens up all kinds of opportunities. You can go back into, you can go down, you can go out to 85 if you want, and come back up through the high school. You can go in. There's lots of places you can go.
Right. But you said if you're a runner, you already figured it out. What if you're not a runner?
No, then that's one of the things we need to let people know how they can figure it out. Right.
That's my point.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I agree.
So we've talked about, I mean, we're supposed to be talking kind of about outreach and listening sessions and how we do that. But I think we're all sort of heading in the direction where, you know, I think we're going to have to break into a couple of subcommittees. Or we want to call them officially subcommittees or not, to think about that. But having a few folks focus on exactly what you're talking about. So, you know,
I think
let's get the map from Gary, and 3 people go away and sit down in a room and start that prioritization and bring it back. And the same with the outreach. The outreach piece is going to be website, and it's going to be listening sessions, and that ought to be another where we have 3 people, you know, we got 9 people who go off and just kind of focus on that. In between, we've got a whole crap load of other stuff that's got to be done, but I think to your point, it's easy to get away from.
Yeah,
the
I think we
key.
called them working
As
groups.
far as,
Yeah.
as far as outreach goes, I think you just gotta go, you know, we gotta try it. And you may go have a meeting with the realtors and come back and say, well, that wasn't really productive.
So, you know, going out and talking to Chuck Joseph.
I would say to someone like Chuck, could you organize a meeting for us?
Okay.
Post it.
Yep.
And then, you know.
Yeah. And what other groups should,
Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah,
chamber? Yeah.
yeah, whoever they are, but just ask them to do it and then go talk to them and see what they have to say.
Okay.
And if you encounter some enthusiasm, that's a good thing. If you don't, that's a good thing too. At least you learn something.
Well, and you get some ideas. I mean, again, thinking about what Gary did with sort of the next step from the connectivity study or survey was when he presented that to the public, you know, as sort of with the back end being a listening session, you know, it did get kind of hijacked, and I think.
Well, well, what you gotta do
Put that
is
happen.
you gotta limit people to a certain amount of time and you don't let them hijack it.
Mhm.
They try.
Hmm?
This particular person was. That's
Yeah,
okay.
but,
It was okay.
but that's okay. You
Yeah.
can still get the other information from
I
it.
just want to know here a piece of information. At the last stewardship council meeting, I said I was growing interested in trails, and I asked if they could do a presentation from DCR on their trail program, including their grant program and their criteria. So that's being teed up. When that will happen, our next meeting in April is down at Borderlands. I hope it's a Zoom meeting, and then it'll be recorded, and if you want to learn about it, you can either watch our meeting or you can just go and watch the recording. And usually they're 20 to a half hour presentation on whatever the particular program is, and then all the 13 councils have an opportunity to ask a question.
What was this group that you addressed? Oh,
It's the stewardship council, it
Stewardship.
oversees DCR, so I asked DCR, the commissioner, to just, would like a I'd like a presentation on trips, so that's in the works. When it's gonna be done, I don't know yet.
Right, because, and they have all, to Jack's point, all the, or, to Gary's point, they have all the different levels of trail.
Right, but I just,
Yeah.
it might be interested for people to see
Yeah.
their total view of trails and how they want,
Mhm.
how they view connectivity.
Okay, so realtor groups, chamber, I mean, obviously boards and
I think
committees,
that's a good start.
maybe just start with them.
Just keep branching.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then, so Gary will send over his map. And I can send that out when he does, and let's start looking at that. I mean, God, way back, I was looking through a back machine. You remember when we first had the Trails Committee, we put a list of all the
Segments and stuff.
segments and trails together, and did you have the length for?
I don't think I had links on that.
No, I don't think so, but you had, was a lot of trails. And that, they need to go on a map, and where we got bogged down was that whole public-private issue as far as putting together that one big map. What's the base? We don't want to fresh cut anything, but on the other hand, you couldn't use OpenStreetMap at that time, but it sounds like you can now, because you can mark things as private.
So this Lexington Loop business, is that available on the Lexington site if you go there?
Yeah.
And so it's got listed loops. And it's a combination of trails through the woods and sidewalks and roads.
Yeah.
Is that-
Well, yeah, and that's true, but thing I look at it is, the Minuteman Trail is the main,
It's the main
is the
spot.
main,
Yeah, sure.
right? And they have loops and spurs and connections to businesses and shopping plazas.
That was our one.
And that was it. So it's just like, again, because it's a straight shot through this town of Lexington, all these loops and other connections. And businesses where they have like advertisements, be like, oh, stop at this place for ice cream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great draw.
Yeah, you see. Well, no, it makes sense. You look at it, you're like, yeah, and they got it fun. Presumably it was funded by the businesses that put ads on it. But
But yeah, no, but it worked because you do have all those shorter loops, and the loops of various lengths, which they tell you.
it doesn't include all the Lexington trails. I'm being presumptuous. I look at it and
Yeah.
maybe there's 30 trails on it. I'm assuming they got more.
Yeah, but I think they connect, like they have 24 open spaces and, or open space parcels, and those are all connected through that.
Right.
When they connect, it's across Lexington, it's connecting open space schools, points of interest. I think some of the same things we'd be talking about doing, so.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. I think it's a good model.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So to extend that to Hopkins, we've got the Center Trail and we've got Pleasant Street and, the Loop Road. Would we just be marking that, going that way as a loop?
You can always start with what you have.
Exactly. People don't know where it is, so they're like, and on West Main or walking down Main Street going, well, I want to do a 2-mile loop with my kids, where do I go?
Right. You park at the high school and you go this way. So go counterclockwise and you can
So
see
the way
this.
that it's done would be at the web level or with signs on street
I think that's TBD. TBD. I wouldn't make a call. Right now it'd have to be on some type of map.
Yeah, electronic, right? So
Ideally, yeah.
So then my question would be, are there going to be butters on that loop that are going to object to us broadcasting that loop?
Publicizing the trail that already exists.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can.
I don't know.
I just can't stop them.
Yeah, I'm like, what are they gonna say? Don't publicize.
Don't walk on my sidewalk.
We have a little bit of history of that with Upper Georgia.
We do, we do.
Because people objected to Peter pointing out that you could get to the Hughes property from Chamberlain Street before. They really did.
I think you have to be sensitive to it, but I
I think we're getting ahead of ourselves right now.
Oh, that's exactly what I'm
Yeah.
thinking that too. It's just like,
We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, or when we get a little bit
But
closer.
should we start designating the loops now then?
what I would do is just map out the trails that currently exist.
Well, we already know where those are.
Is it all?
It's not on the map.
It's not on a map. We talked about it at the first meeting, and you can go to 3 different websites and get 3 different points of information.
Yeah.
And you got some people saying, no, if I go to open source, there's private trails. Right? And you just told me that it all exists. Well, where?
Yeah, we need to have ours that we,
I think when we have our discussion-
Like,
Right.
it sucks.
The point of the matter is,
Discussion about the current websites, we'll be able to visualize it, put it out there, and we can talk.
well, I mean, that's the other thing too, is that I typed in Hopkinton Trails Committee, right? And the Upper Charles pops up, and that's the first thing you see.
Yep.
And then at the last meeting, we were told that we can't do that because the town wants us to use the website.
No.
I'm just saying, this is what was
It's
reiterated at the last
confusing,
meeting.
and I think what Elaine's suggesting is that this committee decide,
Okay.
look at what we have
Mm.
and decide what we want to include and have one at the end of the day, I think is.
Right, well, right now, there's 3 sites.
We
right?
haven't had that meeting yet.
And if you say, I want to walk a trail, and you're saying that it's all exists, well, I don't know where to find it.
I'm saying there's lots of trails that exist. What don't exist is demarcations of loops that include roads. That's something.
Oh,
To the chair, Chuck Dodgy. You folks were, talking about loops and with the Center Trail, Chamberlain, et cetera. I just want to remind you that Berry Acres ties in there too. And also, there's walkable trails there now that connect to the apartments. That is a whole nother set of potential loops that need improvement. And some land acquisition. But it's, part of a loop complex in that general area.
yep, thanks.
we'll do this, we can do this every single meeting.
No, I know.
We talk about, let's bubble this up. Let's get some framework to where we want to go. Let's get some consistency on our knowledge. And then we work from there. And this is the 3rd meeting we've had the same conversation where somebody comes in, and I don't want to put Chuck on the spot because I think his points are right. But we say, oh, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this, and it just, we're all over the place. It's just, there's no,
Oh, why don't we do this? Why don't we start with Gary's map?
Yeah.
You said you've looked at 3. You've looked for Hopkinton Trails, the Trails Committee.
I Googled Hopkinton Trails Committee. That's what I Googled, literally.
Okay.
Open quote, Hopkinton, 3 websites pop up.
Okay.
And then, I'm willing to bet all 3 of them have some type of linkage to trails.
Mhm.
I didn't dig deeper, but I mean, that's just my observation. And we want to have consistent messaging. I was just like, right now it's inconsistent. Right out of the gate, you just literally, you Google that term and you come up with 3 different answers.
Well, the website is on the agenda for, was it next week we had talked about?
Yeah, because
Linda's gonna do it right.
Linda's gonna do that, but I think it might be worth, as part of that, you to kind of go through and say, hey, here's the 3 that showed up. How do we move away from that? Have you looked at OpenStreetMap or any of those? Which would be the best of the, all trails, OpenStreetMap? I've got one, Where Did I Run, that I use.
I use Trailforks and they're pretty comprehensive.
Yeah,
We gotta look at them all and,
Yeah,
is there a gate?
Gaia, I've heard of it. I've never used it.
yeah, I mean, that's, what is,
I think Lewandowski introduced me to Gaia.
yeah.
I use all trails.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, so there's at least 4 of them.
Right, but which is the best one?
Well, I mean, that's.
What are the advantages of each of those?
Oh, I can't speak to that.
And they all show your location, you think, maybe on the map? So I know that Hopkins.
I guess maybe for the next meeting,
Well, we should,
can each of us who's familiar with one look at it?
Yeah.
And think about strengths and weaknesses of it. Does it cover hold on, does it cover most of the trails in town? Does it allow you to distinguish between public and private? Because what we need to do is find ourselves a base program that we're ultimately going to use.
Yeah, but a lot of those systems are subscriptions.
Mm,
Like at our Trail Forks, you can look at the trails at home, but if you want to do it on your phone or use the GPS, you have to pay for it.
all trails are similar.
I think OpenStreetMap, you don't.
Right, OpenStreetMap, you don't, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a free version of all trails.
Right, but that's, what are the advantages of all trails? What are the advantages of Trail Forks? What are the advantages of OpenStreetMaps and the one that I use? And, if we can come to the next meeting and say, hey, this is the strengths and weaknesses, and then we can say, okay,
And I think that gets you the level of granularity for each trail. Now, you mentioned the Lexington, that, my gut is you'll be able to find the granularity on all those apps,
right,
right?
Right.
But there's no overall, that right now they have a big map, I mean, it's printable. Right, and you can eyeball, all right, this is how I want to do loop. How do you find that loop? You go to your app, whatever the app is, and you say, I'm looking up this trail.
But surely when we do this, we should have a computer that's showing the application up there on the screen so we can all see what we're talking about, right? We don't want to just write down the strengths and, we don't want to just write down the strengths and weaknesses without reference to the actual application.
When we're doing it, yeah.
You can't put it up there on the screen. Should put it up on the screen. Now we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, but I mean, I think at some level,
Speakers.
like you say, they're all going to give you
Doing.
what you need, but there may be things that make one or the other a non-starter. So it's really more that if they don't allow us to distinguish public-private, then to me, that was the non-starter we hit with, 4 years ago or 5 years ago on your first.
Hand us.
Yeah, Chuck?
On the town's GIS now, there is an OpenStreetMap layer that shows the OpenStreetMap map trails, some of which are out of date, but it's a beginning. And they're essentially the same trails that would show on all trails that they get most of their stuff from OpenStreetMap. The advantage to what's on the town website or GIS now is that it also shows property boundaries. So you can identify the owner easily and relate it to the trails. So to find that on the town GIS website, you go to their layers options, and there is they have local ESRI, and then there's another option for other, and this is under other.
That's good to know. I've used the GIS quite a bit, actually, Chuck, and I've never used that option. I'll look that up. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's probably the basic one.
Wow. And that's already on the website.
Yeah, yeah.
It's almost kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah,
Question answered.
but take that and then take what
Yeah,
Gary
it's like-
started and.
Yeah, and then marry the two together. That's a great suggestion.
Yeah. No, 'cause I think that is, gets rid of some of that frustration of, frankly, I mean, that's something we haven't been working on for a long time, but not having a lot of progress and having the town GIS folks involved was not as helpful as.
I think that's why they made so many improvement stuff, because they were getting so much pushback from. It's like us.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we went to the point of trying to hire the folks who would put together. I mean, if you look at the Holt website, Huffington Land Trust website, they have a pretty good map of the town with their properties, and then you click down to their trails on their property.
Right.
Like, why don't we do that for the town? And the town said, no, we'll do that for you. Like, but. you're-
Okay, so, all right, so let's,
So what happened? They didn't.
Nothing, well, no, they.
well,
Linda and Chuck spent a long, unhappy time trying to get any movement from
so then who said no?
Hmm?
Then who said no?
Norman.
All right, so Norman said no. You have to use our team, and then we got a lot of pushback from their team.
the team just wasn't particularly helpful. We put stuff in and you'd lose half of it. You'd go in the next time to use it and the maps, the trails that had gone in were gone. And it had been moved to a different location, or it was something that would work in the private sector, let's just say, but not for very long. It was very frustrating.
To that point, we do have a new town manager.
Yes,
We do have a new trails committee.
yes.
Maybe you.
Yeah, I think this may be third time,
Good
fourth
to
time.
Sit down with Elaine and say, look, this is what we want to do.
Mhm.
You get an idea of what, and then let it go somewhere else, but then deal with it, you know, but I think we're a new committee. I think we need to try and start fresh and
So, yeah, so we're gonna be talking website.
Well, Jack, I mean, I think you got the most experience with working with the government.
well, you know, I worked at a government agency that I think worked pretty well.
Well, you got a lot more experience than I do on working with government. I was gonna say.
Well, I mean, the thing well, just my opinion is, if you do get people in government that
No,
don't just don't assume they don't want to do it, or they whatever, push them on it. And that's why I think in this case, we were just appointed by the select board. We sit down with Elaine and say, this is now, if that doesn't work out, at least we've tried and we can lay down a foundation to do that. You do need to push people to get them to do something sometimes, and sometimes they just do it, but.
Yeah, so I think for the next meeting, Lynn, as part of the website, the whole website thing, maybe prioritize the townwide trail map, getting us a base that we can then use to put these connectivity pieces in.
Yeah, I mean, and literally, we could start with the Center Trail and Loop Road,
Right,
you know? I never trust anybody's gonna push back on those.
right. And, you know, and you would send it by going down Hayden Row for a long,
And it just keeps expanding, expanding, expanding.
right.
Change their.
Yeah, because I mean, and that's a good point, is that we do have a new.
We have a new charge, we have a new town manager.
Right.
We got Jack. I mean, there's a million things we can say in this town about things that end with the slush and with the answer. That's what Norman said. Well, Norman's gone.
Right.
And for better or for worse, but I think we should give Elaine that opportunity and say that we think as a new trails committee that this is what we need, and we need the towns to help or let us do it on our own, whatever. But rather than rattle around about it.
Right, and she has a planning perspective she was the town planner for years and years and years.
So we'll give it a try.
And she's.
I agree with Jack.
Yeah,
And I mean, if she says no, whatever, then,
Yeah, I
then
don't-
we deal with that too.
Right.
I don't expect her to. I mean, she's been, like, I reached out, there's a property at the end of the Echo Trail that would connect to Hayden Row. They're trying to buy that property for,
10, 15.
a long time. And finally got hold of the owner, which is problematic, but I got hold of him and he said, yeah, you know, we had an appraisal done. It was like $20,000. He owes back taxes. And he said, yeah, but I'm only gonna work with you. Norman's like, no, he's gotta work with me. Never was able to get hold of the guy again. That was been that guy, but I reached out to Elaine and said, hey, what's the story on taking land for back tax? Guy hasn't paid the tax, and then she put me in touch with the town assessor and said, yeah, we can take another run at it.
That may be crazy here, but it seems to me, I haven't dealt a lot with Elaine, but as I found it before, and I think they have a new committee. My expectation, they had a new committee because there was quite a bit of turbulence around trails in town, let's be honest. And they created a new committee. So we go to Elaine and say, you gotta help us be successful here. I'll gladly go with you, Peter, and just say, you know, you're gonna help us or not, because there's expectations that this thing's gonna be.
Yeah, let's talk about it at the next meeting. I mean, Linda has the experience, so I think maybe you and Linda can work on.
That's fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
glad to do that.
I
Yeah,
think
the
you
nuts
should
and
keep
bolts,
that
but yeah,
respect.
going.
Like everyone to keep an open mind when you do look at the old Charles Trail website,
Mhm.
because it could be that be the way to go, because it's just like a
Well,
professional
I
thing.
think the map and coordinating where it gets stored and served with Elaine are two different things.
Well, we needed her cooperation.
Yeah, no, I agree.
To-
I agree.
I would,
Now,
together,
what's the
and that's all
landing
I'm saying.
page and all that kind of stuff, that's still TBD, but.
and I would say the people in the
I
town
was just asking everyone to keep an open mind.
have a fundamental right and interest in knowing where the trails are. And the town, if it's a responsive government, should provide that tool. I don't know, call me crazy.
I think you're preaching to the choir here.
No, I know. No, but I think this choir has got to preach to another choir. That's,
Well, and having the
That's
backup
my
of
point.
realtors and the chamber on that kind of stuff can help with the preaching,
right, right.
you know? So, good.
Okay, moving on.
Alrighty,
Counting?
yeah, so next time, action item is really gonna be website and in the map. That's gonna be
Website for map.
key focus.
Okay, good.
Connectivity,
Start.
take 10 minutes on whatever Gary sends over to kind of look through that and see where that fits into the whole.
I think that was prioritization. I think that's my big takeaway from Gary.
Yeah.
Prioritization.
Okay.
And then I think all of us should take Chuck's suggestion and hit the GIS and try it out, see what it looks like, just to get our own familiarity with what is available at the town today.
Yeah, the mass map with GIS, that's what he was talking about, right?
Yeah. And he says one of the look throughs is the option of quote unquote other.
Trails marked on it. See right now.
There you go.
In fact, computer worked without
Disturbing everybody.
Shortly, I can show you what it looks like.
Okay, accounting, we don't have any bills yet. Again, Scott was gonna take some of the lead on that, so not much else to talk about there.
Could I just interject another suggestion along the same lines? Is to develop our budget and include line items.
Well, the budget is set at 30,000.
Right.
That's what we have,
And then
so.
we take and develop line items.
Budget.
But in the 30,000
Maintenance.
includes like something we talked about last meeting was that 5,000 was allocated to lawn mowing. Right?
Right, and then, exactly, and then maintenance or outreach, public outreach. At some
Right.
point in time, might need money for that. Or
Okay.
acquisitions or
Right now,
surveys.
so far as we know is that
Materials.
5,000 is already,
That's,
Wait.
that's a definite line
you
item.
know that, right? So our budget right now, in my opinion, is 25.
But the committee could discuss that,
Right.
what's possible line items could be.
Right.
Open space would laugh at your concept that they have $10,000 and I think, you know, that's just it. They don't have any idea what they're spending it on, but they end up spending some of it on various and sundry things.
Would you like me to contact Chuck and ask him if he has any suggestions on how to get people in?
That would be great. Yeah.
I will do that and I will have a report at the next.
Okay.
Wow.
Nick?
Wow.
Yeah.
I just want to see
Over here at the end of the table.
what he suggests.
There you go.
Thank you, Jack.
Yeah, thanks. Saved me. I mean, yeah, and with Chuck, this time it was a very quick, quick meeting.
I've
He was
talked
in the middle of
about it
something else.
before.
He's been busy, but yeah. One of the thing that did come out of the meeting with Chuck was the discussion of the property along Center Trail. And, a lot of that's owned by one person who's interested in development. Obviously, we don't want houses along there. It's something to kind of keep our eyes on. I think there's a thought of, well, why doesn't the town just buy that property? Well, we're probably looking at $1 million for a piece of property that, it's really important in some regards, in the sense of we don't want building right next to the Center Trail. I think, that's sort of the, town jewel at this point with regard to trails, and putting houses right up against it would be really problematic. But is it worth $1 million? Long-term, absolutely. But, is there a way to spend half of that in a couple of houses down in the woods where we can't see them? Split the difference. So that's sort of an ongoing process. I'm just going to keep everybody
Conversation.
aware of it.
Okay.
And with that, anything else to discuss? Motion to adjourn? Move. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
And Fran's off, so we don't have to do it by roll call. Thank you. All right, thanks. And thank you for the push.
All good.
Yes. No, and this, yeah,
Describe them.
it's all good. Yeah. No, but if you feel we're not going in the right direction, then
I don't think.
go in the right direction. I'm not seeing a lot of shyness, but that's.
That's why Jane doesn't sit next to me.
Okay,
No.
just wait. I
Yeah.
thought I was
Here's
giving
with
you a
Brian's
break.
progress.
Now.
Yeah, so all the information is spread out.
Good night, everyone.
Yeah, good night. Good.
Are you on the town JS site?
Yeah.
Is it,
You get to what?
is it open street maps on
No,
that?
no, I went for, they're from the town of Hopkins somehow.
Cause he said it,
There's a GIS maps at a place there.
okay,
So from the town of Hopkinton, you can get.
Yeah,
I thought,
yeah.
something that was interesting on that is I was talking about the new town GIS map.
Yeah,
And, so
they've changed.
Then Elaine basically changed it. And Elaine basically said, yeah, I don't really like that new one that we're using. And I kind of looked at it and said, but aren't you in charge?
Well, right, I mean,
But I think
There's
there's all
aspects of the maps.
I mean, I think in a nice way, but you need to ask and lay it out. And
So it's got a lot of trails marked on it, see, so it's here,
well, he said there's an open street map down here.
There's very going on, I'm very seeing on a trail. So,
They don't, man.
if I go to, here's Elm, see the,
As far as, yeah, what's Tom doing?
so, that's the ones that he's, Cranberry.
Tom?
That I would spend
There,
considerable money, a big field that you could use for that. Yeah.
all these places,
And his,
all we gotta do is put
his daughter-in-law is one of the prime, she uses it every morning. I see her every
Yeah.
morning.
Yeah.
But also, I would run into this and
Isn't she,
logging itself out.
is she one of the houses up there? No.
He lives on,
It might be a weak signal or something.
Okay.
one of the,
That looks all like open streets.
that's Tom's son, I think.
Okay, because then Dan Terry's over by like Whitehall.
I can't keep them straight, but the one who owned that property is the one that used to live in Highland Park. I think he moved in Florida now.
We'll see. When our next meeting is
I want to say the 16th.
the 16th. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know who owns it.
All right. Thank you. I see that.
If that trails presentation is gonna be on the stewardship council on the 13th, I'll let you know, but I won't know until I see the agenda.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. Be interesting to see.
Well,
All right, Ken. Across.
That's GIS. I can never all over the place, right? There's the Minuteman Trail, but
No, there, it's across Lexington, it's a program.
oh, it's different. Cross like,
Yeah.
but it's not, it might not,
Across Lexington map. Yeah. Yeah, that's not it. There.
yeah. Does it say?
No,
Down here across Lexington, yeah.
there you go. Oh, really?
Suspicious of Pete. We have.
There it is, full size. Yeah, pull that one out because it's.
Just this thing?
Yeah.
It's got these loops.
Yeah.
That's a twist thing. Yes.
Rotate, where's the rotate?
It says that's rotate. It's just not actually rotate.
Anyway. Yeah, but you get the idea. It's got these, you know, there's the various
Yeah.
courses.
So it's got them numbered by letter there.
Yeah, and actually on the street, they have like, you'll just follow A's around.
Yeah, okay, so they have, so it's almost like your footprints.
Yeah, yeah. So we can close out
Well,
here.
That idea might work now, it just didn't work before, but
No.